In a galaxy ruled by genetics, one human refused to be bred, and in doing so awakened desire itself. This is where the legend starts. The roar of the Aerodanian Colosseum rolled like thunder across the twin moon sky. Tens of thousands of alien throats screamed for blood, their voices merging into a single oceanic howl that vibrated through the alloy floor. Lights burned white-hot against the haze of dust and sweat. In the center pit, a lone human circled a mountain of black muscle and obsidian skin. Rick Summers' breathing came measured and sharp, his body glistening beneath the weight of alien gravity. Across from him towered the Gorgolan champion, 4 arms, 2 hearts, 1 purpose. Its eyes, molten silver, tracked him like prey. "You fight well for something so soft," the creature rasped, mandibles twitching in amusement. "But this is where your line ends." Rick didn't answer. 3 weeks of the tournament of genetic excellence had taught him that talk wasted oxygen. He shifted his footing, felt the slick grit under his bare soles, and fainted left. The Gorgolan lunged its upper fist, slicing the air. Rick dropped beneath the swing muscles coiling and drove his right hand into the alien's unarmored thorax. Something cracked wet deep. The crowd's scream flipped from delight to shock. The Gorgolan stumbled. Rick swept its legs, pivoted, and in one fluid motion snatched the ceremonial blade from the sand. He pressed it against the creature's neck until blue, luminescent blood welled up like liquid fire. "Yield," he said. His voice was low but carried. For a heartbeat, the entire arena froze. The Gorgolan's multiple eyes flared, then dimmed in reluctant submission. "I yield. Human." The silence shattered into hysteria. Fireworks burst overhead. No human had ever reached the finals, let alone won. Rick stood chest-heaving, feeling the pulse of 1,000 alien worlds screaming his name for reasons they didn't understand. He didn't raise his arms in triumph. He simply looked up at the moons and whispered, 3 weeks of hell. And for what? But somewhere in the royal box, a pair of icy blue eyes watched him with interest. Not admiration, not disgust, but calculation. Later in the quiet that followed victory, Rick was escorted through echoing corridors carved from crystal and metal. Alien guards in silver armor flanked him. The air smelled of ozone and coal perfume. At the corridor's end loomed a door taller than a shuttlecraft engraved with symbols that pulsed faintly with life. The champion of the tournament announced an attendant with translucent skin, his voice a delicate chime. Rick stepped forward into the throne hall. Light refracted through giant crystal spires, painting the chamber in shifting rainbows. At the far end, seated upon a dais of liquid glass, was the reason every competitor had risked death, Queen Selena of Aerodania. She was almost human, almost. Her skin glowed the color of burnished copper, smooth as forged metal. Her eyes pale as frozen seas seemed to see through him. Silver hair cascaded down her shoulders in intricate braids woven with threads of gold. Power radiated from her like gravity itself. Rick stopped 10 paces from the throne and bowed, half because protocol demanded it, half because his legs trembled from exhaustion. "Rise, human," she commanded, voice melodic, yet edged with frost. "You have surprised my people. No off-worlder has ever claimed the title of genetic champion." Rick straightened. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm honored to represent Earth." Her lips curved barely. "Honor is irrelevant. What interests me is potential. You possess a resilience unusual for your kind." She stood descending the steps with the slow grace of a predator. As she circled him, her fingers brushed his arm, tracing the scars earned in the arena. Muscular symmetry, rapid recovery, neural response above baseline. Rick felt like a specimen under glass. Then she snapped her fingers. An attendant approached, carrying a scroll case of dark metal. "President," she ordered. The case opened with a hiss. Inside lay a document shimmering with embedded circuits. "The reproductive contract," she said almost casually. "It is the highest honor our empire bestows. You will provide genetic material to strengthen the royal bloodline." Rick blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "I'm sorry, the what now?" Selena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Your DNA is exemplary. You will reside in the palace breeding quarters. Samples will be collected at scheduled intervals. Our geneticists will handle the integration process. You need only cooperate." He stared at her. "And beyond that, do I get a life, a purpose?" "There is no beyond that," she replied, genuinely puzzled. "You are the vessel. Your genes are the gift. For a moment, the hall seemed smaller, the air thinner. Rick realized he wasn't being honored, he was being collected. He looked down at the ornate contract at the glowing signature line, already bearing his name in preloaded script. Somewhere deep in him, a lifetime of military obedience warred with a single stubborn instinct. He smiled tightly. I see. He took the scroll from the attendant's hands. I'm flattered, Your Majesty. Then very deliberately he tore it in half. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the hall. The attending guards stiffened. The queen froze disbelief flashing across her perfect features. Rick kept tearing into quarters into confetti until fragments drifted down like metallic snow. You can harvest my DNA, he said, voice steady, but you don't get to own me. The silence was absolute. Selena's expression hardened from shock to fury. How dare you, she hissed. No one defies the crown. Maybe that's the problem, Rick said. No one ever tried. Her hands slammed against the control on her wrist. Sirens screamed. Guards flooded the chamber, weapons drawn. Rick raised his hand, smirking. Guess the interview's over. Take him! Selena ordered, her voice trembling, not with fear but rage or something dangerously close to fascination. As the guards seized him, Rick met her gaze one last time. Where I come from, he said, freedom isn't a contract. They dragged him away through the shining corridors, while fragments of the shredded document scattered behind him, glinting in the light like fallen stars. From her throne, Selena watched until he vanished. Around her, courtiers whispered in outrage, but she said nothing. Her gaze lingered on the torn remnants at her feet. For the first time in years, the queen felt something she couldn't categorize in any genetic index. Curiosity, and a faint, unsettling spark of respect. That night, as the twin moons hung over Aerodania's jeweled skyline, the story of the human who defied the queen spread through every channel and alley. Some called him insane, others called him brave. In a laboratory deep beneath the palace, automated systems cataloged his genome, labeling it specimen 173H. But in the cells of that same specimen, something equally important was being recorded. Memory, defiance, the refusal to kneel. Rick Summers had entered the tournament as a curiosity. He left the arena as a symbol. And somewhere in the upper spires, Queen Selena looked out over her empire, the wind lifting strands of her silver hair, and whispered to the empty night, "What are you, human?" The cell door hissed open with a sound like an exhaled sigh. Sterile light flooded the small chamber, gleaming off chrome restraints and glass panels. Rick sat on the narrow cot, elbows on knees, his once ceremonial robe reduced to a rag. Two guards entered, tall, hairless, their skin translucent enough to show veins pulsing with faint blue light. "On your feet, human," one said, his accent metallic as though the language itself disliked forming human words. Rick rose slowly. Round two already. They ignored him, clamping the neural cuffs back around his wrists. A cold vibration bit into his skin. He'd tried to override the lock system the first night. The device had zapped him unconscious before he could even curse. Lesson learned. The guards marched him through another of the palace's endless corridors. Crystalline walls glowed with bioluminescent veins. Alien runes pulsed faintly like heartbeats. He'd been here long enough to realize that Aerodanian beauty was deceptive. Everything that glittered hid a mechanism of control. They stopped before massive double doors flanked by sentinels in ornate armor. One of them announced specimen 173H, summoned by royal decree. The doors opened. Inside stretched the same throne hall he'd defied days earlier, but the energy had changed. Gone was the roar of courtiers. The air now felt cold, calculating, heavy with something unspoken. Queen Selena stood by one of the towering windows, gazing out at the city suspended in its purple haze. Her reflection shimmered across the crystal surface, tall, poised, every inch a sovereign carved from light. "Leave us," she said without turning. The guards hesitated. No one was supposed to leave her alone with the human. But the tone of her voice left no room for disobedience. The door sealed behind them with a low hum. Rick crossed his arms. "So what's this round two of the lecture on how lucky I am to be milked for my genes?" Her head tilted slightly, silver braids swaying. "You are bold. I will grant you that." "Yeah, I've been told boldness looks good on a prison record." Selena turned, then slowly, her gaze glacial. Yet there was no open malice in her eyes, just the analytical calm of someone dissecting a problem. "Your defiance in the throne room has caused complications. Half the court believes I should have you executed. The other half wants you dissected first. Touching. You run a democracy now. Her lips almost curved. Hardly. But I find both options unsatisfying. She approached him, footsteps silent on the polished floor. Your behavior intrigues me. You knew the consequences of defying me, yet you chose humiliation over survival. Rick's jaw tightened. That wasn't humiliation. That was freedom. A word humans seem obsessed with, she mused, even when it cost them everything. Maybe that's what makes it worth something. For the first time, she looked uncertain. It was fleeting, gone in an instant. You misunderstand human. The reproductive contract was not an insult. It was an honor. Our civilization prizes genetic perfection. You would have been revered. As what, a stud horse? Her eyes narrowed, but the insult didn't hit as she expected. Instead, she looked curious. On your world, you choose your mates freely. Yeah, usually, Rick said dryly. We also choose not to be locked in labs while someone harvests our DNA like it's olive oil. Selena studied him in silence. The faint hum of the palace's energy conduits filled the air. Outside, twin moons cast pale light through the crystal walls, painting her face in soft blues and silvers. At length, she said, our species faces extinction. Fertility rates drop each generation. The royal bloodline, the purest, has become the weakest. I have spent years searching for solutions. You, your genome, may be the key. So that's what I am, Rick said, voice low. A key, not a person. If your existence could save billions, does it matter what we call you? Yeah, he said flatly. It does. The quiet stretched until it became unbearable. Selena finally moved toward a console embedded in the wall. Holographic symbols flickered to life, displaying complex genetic helixes intertwined with streams of data. Do you know why I began the tournament of genetic excellence? She asked without looking back. I figured it was your empire's version of The Bachelor minus the roses. Her expression remained unreadable. It began as a controlled study, an attempt to identify superior gene expressions across species. But the process revealed something I had not predicted: humans possess adaptive markers that defy Aerodanian logic. Rick smirked. We call that stubbornness. Perhaps. Her tone softened by a fraction. You've survived trials that killed seasoned gladiators. You recover from injuries thrice as fast as expected. Even your neural responses adapt to unfamiliar environments in hours. You are statistically improbable. He shrugged. We get that a lot. Selena turned off the display and faced him again. You must understand why I cannot let you leave. Your genome is the most valuable discovery in Aerodanian history. Funny, Rick said, because where I come from, it's called kidnapping. That did it. A flash of emotion crossed her face, not rage this time, but something like frustration, almost human. You think me a monster, she said quietly. I think you stopped seeing people as people a long time ago. They stood facing each other across a gulf wider than any galaxy. Then Selena took a breath as if making a decision. Your accommodations will be changed, she said finally. You'll be moved to the breeding wing tomorrow. Cooperate, and you will be treated comfortably. Resist. Her gaze sharpened, and comfort will become irrelevant. Rick smiled faintly, a soldier's kind of smile, the one used right before throwing a grenade. You do what you have to, Your Majesty, but so will I. He turned toward the door, but before it opened, she said, wait. He stopped, not looking back. You are not the first to challenge my rule, she said, voice low, but you are the first to make me question it. He didn't reply. The guards re-entered, escorted him out. Selena remained by the window long after he was gone. Beneath the cold layers of logic and duty, something uncomfortable stirred, a flicker of doubt, or maybe curiosity twisted into something more dangerous. That night, the breeding quarters turned out to be less a prison and more a golden cage. The suite was enormous, decorated in shimmering metallic hues, furnished with every imaginable luxury except freedom. Rick sat on the edge of a bed that looked big enough for 10 people staring at the ceiling's slow-shifting constellations. Food arrived on schedule. Entertainment consoles glowed with hundreds of alien programs. Scientists entered and left wordless, scanning him, taking samples. He'd given them enough cooperation to avoid sedation, but no more. Days blurred, nights stretched. Once he caught a scientist muttering to another, his neural activity spikes during restraint periods. Adaptive aggression pattern confirmed. Rick smiled grimly. Damn right. 2 weeks later, another summons came. Selena again. This time she dismissed the guards even quicker. Her face looked drawn, her posture tenser. The genetic mapping is complete, she said, standing across from him. You possess sequences that could stabilize our failing chromosome strands. Do you comprehend what that means? Rick folded his arms. That you'll keep draining me dry until your empire learns empathy. Her eyes flared, but not entirely from anger. Your insolence is remarkable. On my world, such defiance would be unthinkable. Maybe that's why your world's dying, he said softly. Something cracked then, not in the room, but in her. A silence heavy as gravity filled the space. For a heartbeat, Rick saw not a queen or scientist, but a woman exhausted, desperate, cornered by destiny. You should be honored, she said at last, though her tone lacked conviction. Few non-Aerodanians have ever been deemed compatible. Compatible, Rick repeated bitterly. Sounds like a word you use for machines. Selena turned away. This conversation is over. Rick's eyes drifted to the scroll lying once more on a nearby table, reprinted, resealed, waiting. He walked to it, picked it up. You know what I think of your contract, he said quietly. Without waiting for an answer, he tore it again. But this time, as the fragments fluttered to the floor, the room's lights snapped red. Alarms wailed. The air vibrated with an automated voice, unauthorized termination of genetic accord. Breach protocol, engaged. Selena froze. What did you do? I guess I just resigned, Rick said, smirking. Guards burst through the door, weapons ready. Selena's voice cut above the chaos. Seize him, but do not harm him. Rick looked at her as they pinned him down, electricity snapping across his cuffs. You can cage my body, he said, but you'll never cage what makes me human. Her gaze locked on his, furious, conflicted, fascinated all at once. And as they dragged him out again, Selena found herself whispering under her breath, not to him, but to the universe. Then perhaps it is the human spirit that will save us or destroy us all. That night, rain of molten plasma shimmered beyond the palace domes, Aerodania's version of lightning storms. Selena stood alone in her chambers, staring out at the storm. On the table behind her, the shredded contract lay where he had dropped it. Every law of her empire demanded his punishment. Every instinct of her mind screamed for control. But deep in her chest, beneath layers of genetic logic, something new had begun to stir. A feeling no algorithm could explain. Rick lost count of the days. Time inside the palace's genetic wing flowed like thick syrup, slow, colorless, suffocating. The walls weren't just walls, they pulsed faintly as though the building itself were alive. Transparent surfaces displayed data in alien glyphs showing his heart rate, hormone balance, neural activity, everything. He wasn't a person here, he was a chart, a specimen. The Aerodanian scientists moved around him like priests in a temple. Their white exosuits gleamed under sterile light. They spoke in low, liquid syllables, recording readings and taking samples. The word had stopped meaning anything. Each extraction left him feeling more like a machine being drained than a man being studied. Hold still, 173H, one technician murmured as he pressed a glass injector against Rick's forearm. The device hissed, blue light flashed. Rick winced. You ever get tired of treating people like lab rats, he muttered. The scientist didn't respond, just turned away, recording results. Rick exhaled slowly, forcing the anger down. He'd learned early that rage wasted energy, and here energy meant survival. When the scientist finally left, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring out through the massive viewport. Beyond the crystal barrier stretched Aerodania's capital, a sprawl of glittering towers beneath twin moons. From this distance, the city looked peaceful. Beautiful even. But to Rick, it was a cage pretending to be a sky. He touched the barrier. It was warm to the touch. The heat wasn't from sunlight. It was from the palace's own energy grid. Even the walls were alive, monitoring him. He muttered under his breath, the prettiest prisons always are. That evening, the door slid open with its usual hiss. But instead of scientists, it was her. Queen of Aerodania stepped into the chamber, her presence dimming the light somehow. She wore no crown this time, just a sleek metallic robe that caught the glow like liquid silver. Rick didn't stand. Your Majesty, he said dryly, back to see if your prized animal's still breathing. Still insolent, she observed, folding her hands behind her back. I expected captivity to temper your defiance. You don't cage a soldier and expect him to become polite. Her gaze flicked to the viewport, to the sprawling alien city below. You misunderstand your place here, Rick Summers. You are not a prisoner. You are a guest of the royal program. Yeah, Rick gestured at the walls. Most hotels don't come with electric restraints. Selena's expression didn't change, but a faint exhale betrayed irritation or amusement. He couldn't tell. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Why resist what could make you immortal? You could father generations of hybrids beings superior to either of our species. Rick rose, closing the distance between them. You're missing the point. I don't want to be immortal. I want to be free. Her voice sharpened. Freedom without purpose is chaos. And purpose without choice, Rick countered, is slavery. Their words collided in the air like blades. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Selena turned away, walking toward a small table by the window. Upon it rested an intricate crystal decanter. She poured herself a drink, a translucent blue liquid that shimmered faintly. Do you know she began that Aerodania's founding queens engineered our genome to suppress aggression and heighten logic? We purged instinct from our bloodlines centuries ago. Rick leaned against the wall, and look how that turned out. No passion, no empathy, just equations. Her hand tightened around the glass. Passion breeds war. Empathy clouds judgment. I am what my world needs me to be. He smiled bitterly. Then your world needs saving. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, Selena looked uncertain, like someone glimpsing a reflection they didn't recognize. She set the glass down and turned back to him. Why do you persist in this defiance? You gain nothing from it but suffering. Rick met her eyes. Because I've seen what happens when you stop fighting for your own worth. I've fought in wars back on Earth. I've seen men trade freedom for comfort. They always regret it later. Selena's voice softened. You would rather die free than live as a legend. Legends fade, he said quietly. Freedom doesn't. Something flickered in her gaze, something dangerously close to admiration. She looked away quickly. Rest, human. Tomorrow the council will decide your fate. Let me guess, Rick said. Execution or dissection. Her expression didn't change. We do not execute valuable specimens. Lucky me. She left without another word, and the doors sealed behind her. That night, Rick dreamed of home. Of the desert training fields of laughter and smoke-filled bars, of a blue sky that didn't hum with alien light. He woke with a start to the sterile whir of the room's machinery. He swung his legs off the bed and stood. His body ached from confinement, but his mind burned. There had to be a way out. He started testing the room again. Pressure points, sensor seams, ventilation shafts. Every few minutes, a hidden drone would descend, scanning him for anomalies. He pretended compliance, then counted the seconds before his return. Patterns. Everything followed patterns. He was still counting when the door opened again. Selena, alone. But this time she wasn't composed. Her eyes were sharper, her tone clipped. Your blood analysis, she said abruptly, shows neural adaptability beyond anything in our archives. Your species' capacity to resist conditioning is astonishing. Rick gave her a wry smile. Told you, we're stubborn. She stepped closer, studying him as though trying to solve an impossible equation. Do you ever stop fighting? No, he said simply. Her lips parted slightly, as though that answer genuinely unsettled her. She turned away again, pacing. I could have you sedated indefinitely, extract what we need without further discussion. You could, Rick agreed, but you won't. She froze, and why not? Because somewhere in that perfect Aerodanian brain of yours, you're starting to wonder if I'm right. The silence cracked between them. Selena's hand twitched, but she said nothing. She just stared at him, studying, calculating, maybe even searching. Finally, she whispered, You are impossible. Rick's grin was faint, but it reached his eyes. We specialize in that. Selena turned sharply and left her steps quick, almost angry, but not at him, at herself. Later that night, the palace lights dimmed for the nocturnal cycle. Rick lay awake, watching the city beyond the viewport. Neon veins of energy pulsed across the skyline. Somewhere out there, he thought, was a way home. He sat up and walked to the small table near the door. The shredded remains of another printed contract lay there. Selena had left it intentionally. Maybe as a test, maybe as a challenge. He stared at it for a long moment, then burned it using the plasma torch hidden in the maintenance panel. The room filled with faint smoke. The contract curled into ash, glowing blue before fading entirely. Rick watched until the last ember vanished. Then quietly he whispered to himself, They built this cage to hold perfection. Too bad they caught humanity instead. In her private chamber, Selena couldn't sleep. She stood before her mirror, the holographic projections flickering with lines of genetic code. Every line, every number represented survival, logic, control. And yet the image of that human standing defiant, unbroken, kept bleeding through the data like a glitch she couldn't erase. She whispered almost to the mirror, Why does your chaos feel like truth? No answer came, only her reflection, half queen, half question. Hours later, as dawn light tinted the Aerodanian sky lavender, Selena's chief scientist entered her chamber unbidden. Your Majesty, he said, bowing low, the council demands resolution. They insist the human be processed immediately. Selena turned from the window. Her face was unreadable, again mask restored. Tell them the subject's genome is still under analysis. But Your Majesty, she cut him off. Do it. The scientist hesitated, then bowed. As you command. When he left, Selena exhaled slowly, her pulse quickened. She didn't understand why she had just lied for him. All she knew was that for the first time since ascending the throne, she had no idea which side of her own empire she stood on. And somewhere below, in the golden cage, the human who defied her was already planning his next move. The first explosion came just before dawn. Rick woke to the sound of distant thunder that wasn't thunder at all, deep mechanical rhythmic. The walls of his chamber trembled, the light strips flickering to crimson. An automated voice barked something in Aerodanian, sharp-clipped, urgent. He sat up instantly. Instinct took over. His military brain, dormant through captivity, snapped awake. He scanned the room. No guards, no attendants, no drones. That was the first anomaly. The second was the faint smell of ozone and smoke leaking through the ventilation ducts. Something was wrong, something big. Then the door hissed open and a figure slipped inside. Not a guard, not a scientist. Terran, Rick whispered. The alien was younger than most of the council members Rick had seen, tall, with pale, almost translucent skin, and eyes a softer shade of blue than the Queen's. He wore a formal council uniform, now torn and smeared with dust. You are the human, Terran said, breathless. The one who defied the Queen. Rick's hands flexed automatically, ready for a fight. Depends who's asking. The alien stepped closer, glancing toward the door. We don't have time. The palace is under siege. Rick frowned. By who? Purists, Terran said. A militant faction within our own military. They've declared the Queen unfit to rule. They believe her experiments with alien DNA are blasphemy. Rick blinked. So they're rebelling because she wanted to, diversify the gene pool. In their words, Terran said grimly, purge the corruption before it spreads. They've seized the eastern wing. The royal defense grid is collapsing. You must leave now. Rick snorted. Leave with what good intentions? They took my weapons, my comms, my freedom. Tehran reached into his sleeve and pulled out a small metallic disc, no larger than a coin. Take this. Rick accepted it cautiously. The disc hummed faintly in his palm. What is it? Security override. It can unlock your restraints in any standard issue control interface. But you must move quickly. Once the purists breach the lab complex, they will destroy everything you included. Rick stared at him. Why help me? Terran hesitated, eyes darting to the hallway. Because not everyone in the council supports her methods. We want reform, not extinction. You were never supposed to be treated like this. Guess somebody forgot to tell the Queen. Terran's expression hardened. Queen Selena is not evil human. She's desperate. She believes your genome can save us from collapse. Rick's jaw tightened. Save you by killing me slowly. Before Tehran could answer, a blast shook the corridor outside. The lights flared, then went dark. Emergency strobes flickered to life, bathing the room in red. Tehran cursed in his native tongue. They've breached the west gate. I must go. He turned to leave, but Rick grabbed his arm. What happens to her, the Queen? Terran paused. The purists intend to execute her before the day ends. They call it purification. And then he was gone. Rick stood alone in the pulsing red light, the override disc still warm in his hand. He looked at the door, at the restraints, at the faint reflection of himself in the glass, gaunt, furious, alive. Damn it, he muttered. I'm not dying in a gilded fishbowl. He pressed the disc to the lock. A spark snapped through the cuffs and they fell away. The same surge fried the room's sensors, leaving the air filled with the smell of burnt circuits. Rick took one deep breath and stepped into chaos. The palace had become a war zone. Alarms screamed through the halls. Smoke crawled along the ceilings like black fog. Alien guards, loyalists, and rebels alike clashed in bursts of plasma fire. Rick stayed low, moving through the shadows, scavenging what he could, a fallen rifle, a utility belt, a set of armor plates that didn't quite fit. The corridors were alive with motion and death. Aerodanian bodies lay scattered across the glass floors, their luminescent blood glowing faintly in the dim light. Rick moved like a ghost through it all. Years of Earthside combat training carried him instinctively. Hug corners, check reflections, listen before you move. He reached the central lift, found it disabled, and pried open a maintenance hatch instead. The shaft smelled of oil and ozone. Climbing upward, he followed the distant vibrations of combat until he emerged into the grand hall. The air here was thick with energy discharges. Through the shattered windows, he saw fire rising from the city columns of smoke, twisting up toward the moons. And there at the far end of the room was her. Queen Selena stood on the dais, plasma staff in hand, surrounded by her dwindling guard. The purists had breached the throne room. Their leader, a tall, scarred Aerodanian with a ceremonial crest across his chest, advanced through the haze. "Your reign ends today, Your Majesty," he declared, his voice carrying even through the explosions. "Your abominations will die with you." Selena spun her staff, deflecting a blast of energy that scorched the wall beside her. "You speak of purity," she shouted, "yet you bring only ruin. Better ruin than corruption." Rick didn't think. He moved. He lifted the plasma rifle and fired once. The shot hit the purist leader square in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The room froze, all eyes turned toward the source of the shot. Rick stepped out of the smoke weapon raised. "Sorry to crash the party," he said, "but if anyone's killing her, it is going to be me, and I'm not done yelling at her yet." The purist recovered fast. The nearest soldier swung his weapon, but Rick fired again, hitting the man in the chest. Blue blood splattered across the polished floor. Selena seized the moment, launching herself into the fray. Her staff hummed, releasing arcs of energy that sent attackers flying. Rick dove into the melee beside her, moving like a force of nature. For every strike Selena landed with precision, Rick countered with brutal efficiency, human brawling mixed with military training. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder. The smell of burnt fabric filled the air. Selena whirled, blocking a killing blow meant for him. He grinned despite the pain. "We make a hell of a team, Your Majesty." "Do not presume familiarity," she snapped, parrying another attack. "Then stop saving my life." Another blast rocked the throne room. Glass rained from the ceiling. When the smoke cleared, the purist leader was on his knees, clutching his wound. His soldiers lay scattered dead or retreating. Rick leveled his rifle at the leader's chest. "It's over." The alien sneered. "You think killing us will change anything human? You are the infection. She brought you here, and through you, she will damn us all." Rick's finger hovered on the trigger. But Selena's voice cut through the tension. "Enough," she commanded. "He will stand trial." The purist spat glowing blood. "Your mercy will cost you your throne." "Then so be it." Selena's eyes flicked to Rick, silently asking a question she couldn't voice. He lowered the rifle. "Your show, Queen." The purist collapsed. When the last echoes of combat faded, Rick leaned against the nearest column, catching his breath. "You're welcome," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Selena stared at him. "You could have escaped in the chaos. Why return?" He shrugged. "I'm bad at leaving people behind, even people who kidnap me." A strange sound escaped her, not quite a laugh, not quite disbelief. "You are the most illogical being I have ever encountered." "Yeah," he said, "that's what saves us sometimes." Before she could reply, the palace intercom crackled to life. A voice echoed through the shattered hall Terrans. "Attention all loyalists. The purists control the security grid. They've issued execution orders for every non-pure bloodline. The capital is falling." Selena's jaw tightened. "They intend to purge the entire city." Rick stepped beside her, scanning the display flickering across the remaining consoles. "Then we stop them, starting with getting you out of here." She hesitated. "You would help me after everything I've done." He reloaded his weapon. "Let's just say I'm not a fan of genocidal fan clubs." Selena turned toward the throne. "There is a network of emergency tunnels behind the dais. They lead to multiple exits. One connects to the royal hangar." "Perfect," Rick gestured. "Lead the way, Your Majesty." For once, she didn't correct him. As they disappeared into the hidden passage, the throne room behind them erupted in fire and falling stone. The last thing Rick saw before the doors sealed shut was the burning emblem of the Aerodanian Empire collapsing into ash. And for the first time since his capture, he smiled. Not because he was free, because for once the entire universe was as pissed off as he was. The hidden tunnel behind the throne was narrow, its walls alive with faint bioluminescent veins. Rick and Selena moved fast, boots pounding the ancient metal stairs, as tremors from above rattled dust from the ceiling. Where does this lead? Rick asked, scanning the passage ahead. The royal hangar, Selina replied, her voice echoing softly. These tunnels date back to the succession wars built to ensure the monarch's escape during assassination attempts. Rick grunted. Nice to know paranoia is universal. They reached a junction. 3 paths split the tunnel like the spokes of a wheel. Selina hesitated. Left leads to the city, right to the hangar. Straight ahead, deeper underground to the royal bunker. Bunker's useless if your enemies own the sky, Rick said. We take the hangar. She nodded once. Another explosion rumbled through the palace above them, followed by the distant whine of collapsing towers. As they turned right, Rick noticed her falter slightly. The cut on her arm from the throne room battle had reopened, faint blue blood glinting against copper skin. You're hurt, he said. It's nothing, she replied, forcing herself upright. Yeah, I've heard that one before, he muttered. Let's fix it after we're not getting bombed. They pressed on. The tunnel sloped upward until faint daylight seeped through a grating ahead. Selina placed her palm on a crystalline panel. It flared with recognition. The wall slid open, revealing the private royal hangar. Rick stopped dead. Now that's a view. The chamber stretched like a cathedral, its ceiling open to a sky swirling with purple storm clouds. Rows of sleek starships gleamed under the cold light, some large enough to carry armies, others small and predatory. Selina moved toward one of the smaller craft. That one, she said, pointing to a 2-seat scout ship, fast, maneuverable, and equipped for stealth. Rick followed, admiring the craftsmanship. You build good toys, I'll give you that. But before they could board, the hangar doors began to grind open from the opposite end. A harsh metallic voice barked orders in Aerodanian. Damn it, Rick said. Company. A squadron of purist soldiers poured in, weapons raised. The commander, his armor etched with the purist insignia, shouted, Secure the hangar, the queen is here. Rick ducked behind a fuel container. Selina pressed herself against the opposite wall, eyes darting between him and the console that controlled the hangar systems. They'll destroy every ship if they reach that panel, she said. Then let's make sure they don't. Rick peeked around the corner. 6 of them, heavily armed, advancing methodically. The scout ship sat exposed in the center of the hangar, their only escape and their biggest target. Too many to take head on, Rick muttered. We need a distraction. Selina's gaze flicked toward the main control console near the wall. If I can trigger an auto-launch sequence on the royal flagship, it'll draw their attention. Sounds risky. It is. Then it's perfect. Rick laid down suppressive fire plasma bolts, sizzling across the hangar floor. The soldiers ducked behind cargo crates, returning fire in short bursts. Sparks rained from the walls. Selina darted toward the control station cloak, trailing behind her like liquid silver. Make it flashy, Rick yelled. Moments later, the engines of the massive royal starship roared to life. Its thrusters ignited in a blinding blue glow. The purists shouted in alarm, turning toward the colossal vessel. Now, Rick shouted. He sprinted from cover, covering Selina as they bolted for the scout ship. A plasma bolt grazed his side, burning through his jacket, but he didn't slow. Selina hit the ramp controls and the small craft's door slid open. They dove inside just as the purists realized their mistake and opened fire. Can you fly this thing? Rick demanded, strapping into the co-pilot seat. Selina's hands flew across the controls. Of course. The engines hummed to life, a deep thrumming sound that vibrated through the deck. The ship lifted off just as plasma fire streaked past the viewport. Selina banked hard, sending the scout ship spiraling toward the hangar doors. Hang on, she warned. Always do, Rick muttered through clenched teeth. The scout ship burst out into open sky. Below them, the Aerodanian capital burned vast plumes of smoke rising from shattered towers. Above, sleek interceptor crafts swooped like hummingbirds. Selina pushed the throttle. The ship shot forward, cutting through the air at breakneck speed. Behind them, 3 interceptors peeled away from formation and gave chase. Rick checked the display. They're locking on. This vessel has minimal weaponry, Selina said grimly. It was designed for reconnaissance, not battle. Then we'll have to outrun them. The first plasma bolt screamed past their wing, leaving a trail of fire. Rick braced against the console. You call this outrunning? Selina's eyes were fixed on the horizon. There, the Crimson Canyons. Rick glanced at the map. The terrain ahead was a maze of towering red rock spires, their surfaces glowing faintly in the twilight. You're planning to fly through that, unless you prefer being vaporized. He grinned. Ladies first. The ship dove low, entering the canyon system. Jagged cliffs loomed on either side, their crimson surfaces rushing past at terrifying speed. The interceptors followed plasma fire, lighting up the narrow passages. Selena's hands moved like lightning over the controls, tilting, weaving, flipping the ship between the stone pillars. Rick watched in awe as she flew like the canyon was part of her bloodstream. "You do this often?" he asked, ducking as a boulder exploded beside them. "Not since my coronation," she replied dryly. A plasma bolt clipped their stabilizer, sending the ship spinning. Rick grabbed the side console, trying to steady the flight. Port stabilizers hit. "I can compensate," Selena said, fighting the controls. "But we can't take another direct hit." Rick's gaze darted to the tactical display. "There's a bottleneck ahead, narrow pass. If we can drop something behind us, we might block them in." Selena shook her head. "Our cannons aren't powerful enough to cause a collapse. Then we'll improvise." He unbuckled his harness and grabbed the emergency supply case. Inside rations, medkits, and geological survey charges, small but potent explosives used for mining. Rick grinned. "Perfect." He handed them to Selena. "Arm these for a 5-second delay." She hesitated only a moment before her copper fingers moved swiftly, programming the devices. "Done. What's your plan?" "You'll see." He moved to the rear hatch, slamming his fist on the release. The airlock opened, wind roaring into the cabin. Selena glanced over her shoulder. "You're insane." "Yeah," he shouted over the wind, "but it works." The canyon walls blurred past in streaks of crimson. As the ship reached the bottleneck, Rick tossed the armed charges out the hatch and slammed it shut. "Go!" he yelled. Selena gunned the engines. The scout ship surged forward, pulling out of the canyon just as a massive explosion rippled through the stone behind them. The passage collapsed in a thunderous cascade of rock. One of the pursuing interceptors was caught in the blast, vanishing in a bloom of fire. The others veered off, forced to retreat. Selena stabilized the ship, breathing hard. That was unnecessarily reckless. Rick collapsed into his seat, grinning. "You're welcome." "I meant," she said, glancing sideways, "you could have activated the external cargo release instead of opening the airlock manually." He blinked, then laughed. "Well, damn, that would have been smarter." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Characteristic human bravado. We call it creative problem solving. The humor faded as the warning lights flared red again. "Stabilizers failing," Selena reported. "We'll need to land before we lose control." "Where?" "The Verdant Valley. Uninhabited but suitable for repairs. Hold on." The ship began its descent, trailing smoke. Below, the valley spread out like a jewel, lush green forests and silver rivers beneath a violet sky. As they entered the atmosphere, turbulence shook the cabin violently. Rick grabbed the console. "You sure this thing can land?" "Define land," Selena muttered. The ship skimmed treetops, then slammed into the meadow, carving a long trench before coming to rest beside a small lake. The cockpit filled with the hiss of escaping steam. Rick coughed, checking his limbs. "Still in one piece. You." Selena slumped forward, a trickle of blue blood running from a gash on her temple. Rick unbuckled, reached over, and gently tilted her face toward him. "Hey, stay with me, Queen." Her eyes fluttered open. "You called me by name." Seemed like the right time to drop the titles, he said, inspecting her wound. "It's shallow. You'll live." She smiled, faintly exhausted. So dramatic human. "Yeah," he said softly, "we do drama pretty well." He helped her out of the cockpit. Outside, the valley glowed in the light of the setting suns. Alien flowers swayed under the soft wind. For a moment, despite the wreckage, it felt like peace. Selena looked up at the twin moons rising above the horizon. "We're safe. For now." Rick nodded. "For now." He glanced at her, bruised, proud, defiant, even in exhaustion, and couldn't help but think, maybe survival isn't just about DNA after all. The Verdant Valley was nothing like the Aerodania Rick had seen from captivity. Gone were the cold, gleaming towers and sterile corridors. Here, the world breathed. Vast emerald canopies shimmered under the twin suns, while the air carried the scent of wildflowers that glowed faintly in the dusk. Tiny creatures darted through the air like living sparks. Everything pulsed with color, with life. Rick sat by the lake, rinsing dirt from a makeshift bandage. Selena sat a few meters away beneath a tree whose branches wept strands of silver moss. The cut on her temple had stopped bleeding, but she was still pale, or whatever passed for pale in someone with copper skin. She watched him quietly, her usual regal armor replaced by exhaustion and silence. Rick glanced up. "You should rest." Her eyes flicked toward him. "You should learn when to give orders and when to keep silent." He chuckled. "Guess I'm still bad at royal etiquette." "You have no etiquette," she said flatly. But there was no venom behind it, only fatigue. He sat beside her anyway, the soft ground cool beneath them. For a moment, neither spoke. The alien sky stretched above purple gold and infinite. Selena broke the silence first. Why did you tear up the contract? Rick tilted his head, studying her. You really don't get it, do you? I understand that you jeopardized your life for a principle. Yeah, he said. That's exactly why. She turned to him, frowning slightly. Principles do not preserve species. Survival requires sacrifice. Rick picked up a pebble and tossed it into the lake. Funny thing that, back home we've had plenty of leaders say the same thing. Sacrifice freedom for safety, sacrifice people for progress. Always ends the same way. Selena's voice softened. You think I'm like that? He looked at her. I think you were trying to save your people. But somewhere along the way you forgot what being alive actually means. That struck something. He saw it in her face, the faint tremor of emotion she usually buried beneath command. She looked away, staring at her reflection in the water. Do you think I wanted this? She said quietly. To rule over a dying empire, to watch my species fade while our scientists tear apart everything that makes us Aerodanian. Rick didn't answer. Our children are born weaker each generation. She continued, voice breaking just slightly. Those who survive often cannot bear life. We engineered ourselves into a corner, Rick. Too much control, too much purity. And now the royal bloodline, my bloodline, is the most fragile of all. Rick turned toward her. That's why the contract. You weren't trying to build an empire. You were trying to save it. She nodded slowly. My advisors believed that introducing human DNA could repair our genome. I was desperate enough to believe them. And me, he asked, why me? Selena's lips curved into something almost like a smile. You weren't chosen at random. We monitor thousands of species across the galaxy. Humans are anomalies, adaptive beyond logic, emotionally volatile, yet impossibly resilient. You survived environments that would kill our strongest. Statistically, your genome shouldn't exist. And yet it does. Rick smirked. You make it sound like we're cosmic cockroaches. Perhaps she admitted, eyes glinting faintly, but unkillable ones. The humor faded as she looked down at her hands. Still, I treated you as a specimen. Not as a man. For that I offer something I have never offered anyone. He raised an eyebrow. An apology. She nodded. Yes, and my gratitude. You saved my life twice now. Rick shrugged. You'd have done the same. I would not, she said truthfully. Aerodanians do not risk themselves for individuals. It is inefficient. That, Rick said, might be your problem. For the first time since he met her, Selena laughed. Not the cold, calculated laugh of a ruler, but a small, genuine sound that startled even her. It was the kind of laugh that made her seem real, not carved from steel and genetics. Rick found himself smiling too. You should do that more often. Laughs. Yeah, it's good for morale. She tilted her head. Does your kind always resort to humor when confronted with despair? It's either that or cry, Rick said. And crying's bad for reputation. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the alien night awaken. Strange insects hummed. The twin moons cast silver light across the lake. Selena finally spoke again. You risked everything for your principles. I was raised to believe survival outweighed all else. Perhaps that's why your species fascinates me. You cling to ideals even when logic says they will destroy you. That's what makes us human, Rick said softly. It's not strength or intelligence or fancy DNA. It's that we keep choosing the hard way because it feels right. Selena's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. And if your way leads to extinction, then at least we go down fighting for something that matters. That quieted her. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the valley's blossoms. Somewhere distant thunder echoed faint but growing closer. Rick noticed her shiver slightly. Temperatures dropping. Night's cold here. Very, she admitted. He moved toward their crash site, grabbed an emergency thermal blanket from the wreckage and returned. Without a word, he draped it around her shoulders. She looked up at him, surprised. You would share warmth with your captor. He shrugged. You're not my captor anymore. Something flickered behind her eyes, something warm and dangerous. You are unlike any being I have known. Yeah, I get that a lot, he said, sitting beside her again. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It felt like a truce. As the night deepened, their conversation wandered from Earth's oceans to Aerodania's dying stars. Rick described music, laughter, the chaos of humanity. Selena listened like a child hearing sunlight for the first time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Perhaps the solution was never in the genes. Rick turned. What do you mean? Our scientists obsessed over structure, code purity. But your species, your resilience comes from imperfection, from unpredictability, from emotion. He smiled faintly. You're starting to sound human. Selena met his gaze, her icy blue eyes reflecting twin moons. And you human are starting to sound like a philosopher. Don't tell anyone. It'd ruin my reputation. She laughed again, then looked down at the glowing moss beneath their feet. You may have just taught me something no laboratory ever could. What's that? That survival without compassion is merely existence. Rick's chest tightened. He didn't reply. The night wind picked up. Selena pulled the blanket tighter, her copper skin gleaming faintly under the moons. Tomorrow we attempt repairs, she said. The outpost lies beyond the northern range. If it still stands, we may find allies there. And if it doesn't, then she said quietly, we improvise, like humans do. Rick chuckled. Careful. That kind of talk could get you branded a traitor. She looked at him, and this time her smile was real. Perhaps it is time my kind learned how to rebel. They sat together until the moons dipped low, silence stretching comfortably between them. The valley shimmered under alien starlight, two fugitives sharing warmth, distrust fading into something that neither dared to name yet. For the first time since the tournament, Rick felt something close to peace. And for the first time in her reign, Selena felt something dangerously close to hope. Dawn came with fire on the horizon. Rick woke first, the soldier's instinct kicking in before thought. He rose silently, scanning the valley. The mist, the rustle of alien birds, the faint hum of distant engines. Smoke still rose from the direction of the capital, black against Aerodania's lavender sky. Selena stirred beside the dying campfire, her silver hair unbraided, now glinting in soft sunlight. For a second, she looked almost human, tired, vulnerable, but alive. Morning, Rick said, tossing her a piece of ration bread. She caught it easily. Do humans always greet the day with carbohydrates? He smirked. Only when we plan to start a revolution before lunch. That earned a faint smile. Then I hope your revolution includes repairs. The ship still cannot fly. They spent the morning elbow deep in scorched machinery. Rick's earthside engineering training wasn't formal, but it was practical. Selena handled the precision work, rewiring the ship's stabilizer and synchronizing power couplings, while he improvised with duct-tape metal shards and sheer stubbornness. By midday, they had life in the engines, again sputtering, unstable, but enough. Selena wiped sweat from her brow. It may hold for one flight, two if we are lucky. That's one more than we need, Rick said, tightening the last bolt. Let's move. Before boarding, Selena paused, looking back over the valley. The flowers shimmered in the sunlight, swaying gently. This place feels untouched by corruption, she murmured. Rick nodded. Let's keep it that way. They lifted off the scout ship, groaning as it climbed. From above, the valley looked like a green jewel set in the planet's scorched crust, a memory of what Aerodania might have been before it started dying from within. 2 hours later, they spotted the outpost. It was carved directly into the mountainside's sleek white spires, blending with the rock, half hidden beneath the fog. A faint energy field shimmered above it, indicating active defenses. Looks intact, Rick said. Dr. Naren's research facility, Selena confirmed. He opposed the purist movement long before the coup. If he still lives, he will help us. As they approached, a voice crackled through the comms. Unidentified vessel, state your clearance. Selena leaned forward. Code Theta 9, Priority Monarch. A pause, then the gates opened. The ship touched down on a circular platform surrounded by cliffs. As the ramp lowered, a group of Aerodanian scientists rushed forward. One of them, tall, gaunt, his features etched with exhaustion, stopped dead when he saw her. Your Majesty, he breathed. We feared the worst. Dr. Naren, Selena greeted. The purists have seized the capital. We barely escaped. The doctor's gaze shifted to Rick, and this must be the human. Rick offered a small salute. Rick Summers, resident chaos generator. Naren's brow lifted slightly, but there was no hostility, only curiosity. I have read the genetic data, he said. Remarkable resilience. No wonder Her Majesty risked everything to bring you here. Yeah, Rick said dryly. She forgot to mention the part about cages and forced breeding contracts. Selena shot him a look, but he ignored it. Naren gestured toward the entrance. Come, you are both in danger. The purists are tightening their control. We are one of the last safe facilities still operational. Inside the outpost was a blend of sterile laboratories and quiet desperation. Monitors displayed chaos cities in flames, rebel broadcasts, purist propaganda, declaring purity as survival. Selena and Naren gathered in a command room with Rick nearby pacing. The purists have seized the planetary defense network, Naren explained. They've broadcast a message across all colonies. The royal line is dead. They claim to be purging the genetic corruption. Rick crossed his arms. So they're genocidal and good at PR. Great combo. Selena's voice hardened. How long before they reach this facility? Days, Naren replied grimly. Hours if they triangulate our energy output. Rick leaned on the console. Then we hit them first. Naren looked skeptical. With what we are scientists, not soldiers. Rick smirked. Lucky for you, I'm both. He pointed at the holographic projection of the Capitol. Their power lies in control communication grids, drones, automated defenses. Take those down and you break their narrative. Selena studied the map. If we disable the Purity network, the loyalists in the outer provinces might regroup. Exactly, Rick said. You've still got people out there who believe in you, Selena. They just need to know you're alive. The room fell silent. The Queen's gaze met his that same stubborn, unflinching look he'd come to recognize as her version of trust. Naren nodded slowly. It could work. Risky but possible. Rick grinned. Good. Risky's our specialty. Hours later, the outpost became a command center. Loyal scientists, engineers, and surviving guards gathered around, forming a resistance nucleus. Selena's calm authority returned not the cold detachment of a ruler, but the fierce conviction of a leader with purpose again. As night fell, Rick stood with her on the balcony overlooking the valley. The air was crisp, carrying the electric scent of ozone. You've changed, he said quietly. Selena glanced at him. I've merely remembered who I was supposed to be. And who's that? Her eyes reflected the twin moons. A queen who serves her people, not herself. Rick nodded. That's a good start. She turned to face him. And you, human soldier, what do you seek now? He smiled faintly. Still figuring that out. But helping you punch fascist aliens in the face seems like a solid plan for the weak. Selena laughed softly, the sound echoing off the cliffs. You're an infuriating man, she said. Yeah, he replied, but I grow on people. The next day, the rebellion began. Rick led a strike team of loyalists, a blend of scientists, engineers, and ex-royal guards, through the canyons toward the capital. Their goal: infiltrate the Purity network hub beneath the city's central tower. As they moved under cover of dusk, Selena's voice crackled through the comms. Status. Halfway there, Rick replied, minimal resistance so far. Either they don't know we're coming, or they're really bad at strategy. Be cautious, she warned. If you die, I will have to find another human. That would be inconvenient. Rick grinned. Is that your way of saying you'd miss me? Her silence was long enough to count as an admission. The team breached the outer wall using scavenged explosives. Inside, the corridors were filled with propaganda banners, the purest symbol blazing where the royal crest once stood. Rick's team advanced through the darkness, disabling sentries, overriding locks with the disc Terran had given him. They reached the central core, a vast chamber of pulsing energy conduits. At its center stood the Purity mainframe, a towering structure of crystalline code streams. Rick approached the console, connecting a stolen data key. All right, let's shut down your little fascist Wi-Fi. The system resisted AI failsafe's encrypted code, cascading firewalls. But Rick wasn't just a fighter. He'd spent years learning battlefield tech, jury-rigging, human ingenuity against alien logic. Come on, he muttered, typing furiously. Work with me, you over-designed disco ball. Finally, the system flickered. Across the planet, purist broadcasts froze mid-sentence. Their propaganda network went dark. Rick smiled, and that's game. But victory came with a cost. The chamber's alarms blared. A dozen purist soldiers stormed in. Rick and his team returned fire plasma bolts, scorching the air. One by one, his fighters fell back. Rick grabbed the last detonator, priming it to overload the mainframe. Selena, he said into the comm, you'll want to look out your window in 5 seconds. Rick, what are you? He threw the detonator. The explosion ripped through the tower, tearing the network apart in a blaze of blue fire. Rick was thrown backward, armor shattered, consciousness fading. Through the haze, he heard Selena's voice shouting his name. Then nothing. When he woke, everything hurt. The outpost's med-bay ceiling stared back at him. Selena sat nearby, her usually composed face pale with exhaustion. You're awake, she said softly. Yeah, he croaked. How bad? Broken ribs, minor burns. You'll live. He smiled weakly. Good. Would have hated to ruin your rebellion by dying inconveniently. Selena's eyes narrowed and then softened. You destroyed the Purity Network. The Loyalists have rallied. The purest leaders are in custody. So we won. She nodded. We won. Rick exhaled slowly, sinking back against the pillow. Guess humanity's chaos worked again. Selena leaned closer, her voice low. Perhaps chaos was what we needed. He looked at her, meeting her gaze. And now she said we rebuild. Not through control, but through cooperation. There was silence, the kind of silence that felt earned. Then unexpectedly, Selena reached for his hand. You've changed us, Rick Summers. You changed me. He squeezed her fingers gently. You just needed a reminder that even perfection needs a little mess. Her lips curved into a real smile. Perhaps, and perhaps I needed you. The way she said it, calm, unguarded, said everything words couldn't. Months passed. The Aerodanian Empire began to heal. Under Selena's reformed rule, genetic programs were replaced with open collaboration between species. The purists were disbanded, their ideology outlawed. Rick stayed not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His tactical knowledge became the backbone of Aerodania's new defense council. And then came the day Naren called them both to the research wing, eyes gleaming. The hybridization project, he said, has succeeded. And there is more. Selena frowned. More. Naren smiled. Your Majesty, you're with child. Rick froze. Wait, what? Naren nodded. A natural conception, no artificial process. A genetic harmony between human and Aerodanian. Selena's expression softened, tears glimmering in her icy eyes. A child? She whispered. Rick stepped closer, resting a hand over hers. Guess that makes him the first of both worlds. They looked at each other, and in that moment, every battle, every scar, every argument felt worth it. Selena smiled through her tears. We will name him Valen. It means one who stands firm in his principles. Rick's voice was quiet, like his parents'. They stood together, watching the sunrise spill across Aerodania's reborn capital, gold and copper and alive again. Rick wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You know, he said, for a planet that once tried to harvest my DNA, this place isn't half bad. Selena laughed softly, resting her head against him. And for a species I once considered primitive, humans continue to surprise me. Rick looked out at the horizon where smoke had once been, now light returned. We're not the strongest, he said. We're not the smartest. But when the universe tries to break us, he smiled, we stand firm.